Hi, my name is Dan Chitwood, and I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State University in the Department of Horticulture and Computational Mathematics, Science, and Engineering. Welcome to the first video tutorial of Plants and Python. In this video, we'll be going over variables, functions, lists, and indexing. The learning objectives for Python in this video are how to create a variable, using our very first function, print, learning about indexing, learning how indexing can be used to access specific characters and strings, how to create lists, how to use indexing to access specific list elements, how to modify lists, and how to create a list of lists. The plant learning objectives are that plants are essential to human life. Plants are diverse, and more diverse than just the plants we see on land or those that flower. Plants are hierarchically organized, reflecting their evolutionary history. Species are referred to by a genus and a species name, and plants are defined by a single ancient endosymbiotic event that created chloroplasts. The first topic we'll be going over is how to create a variable. Please feel free to type along in your own Jupyter notebook or pause or rewind the video to go over a point again. A variable is a data type in Python that gives you a value back. The value can be a number, like an integer or a float, or it can be a string. A string is a series of characters. Variables do not have quotations. They can be a combination of letters and numbers, and they are assigned a value. Strings, which are a type of value, always have quotation marks. The quotation marks can be double quotation marks, or they can be single quotation marks. Let's create two variables, genus and species, and we're going to give them the values of strings, genus for vitis and species for vinifera. Remember, in order to create your variables, you need to execute the Jupyter shell. The way you do that is by hitting Shift and Enter. Now that we've created our variables, we can see what they are. They'll be able to give us a value back. So for example, if we type genus, now that we've assigned it a value, if we execute the cell with genus, we get vitis back. You can also get the value back of a variable using a function. So let's go over our very first function, the simplest, which is print. A function in Python has a name like print, and it has a set of parentheses. You put an input inside the parentheses, and the function processes the input to produce an output. So for example, the output of the print function is to simply print out the value of our variable. So if we print genus, what we get back is vitis. You can use commas to separate print outputs by a space, and both variables and strings can be used with the print function. So for example, in our print function, if we put a string in quotation marks, the variable genus is equal to, and then we put a comma, and then we put our variable genus. If we execute the print function, what we get is the variable genus is equal to vitis. So that's how you create a variable. That's your first introduction to your first data type in Python, a string, a collection of characters. Let's learn a little bit about indexing. Indexing is a way for us to keep track of and to access characters in a string or the elements of a list, which we're going to learn about soon. Indexing takes the form of square brackets, and it has a start value and an end value separated by a colon. The first element in a series in Python is always 0. It's not 1. It starts at 0. A start value of indexing is inclusive. It is the number itself. But importantly, the end value is not inclusive. The indexing goes up to the end value, but does not include it. So let's remember, we had our variable genus. Remember that we assigned it the value, the string of vitis. Let's try to access the first letter of that string, the V, right? And your first intuition might be that to get to the first element, you would say 1. So we take our variable genus, we put in the square brackets, and we put in a 1, hoping to get back the first character. And we get back the second character instead, the I, not the first. And so this is why it's important to remember that in Python, the first element for indexing always starts at 0. So if we put in the square brackets, we put in a 0, and we have our variable genus. When we use 0, now we get back the first letter, which was a V. And you can see how you're using this number to say which letter of the string that you want to get back. We can also access multiple elements in a string using indexing. Remember, indexing takes the form of square brackets. It has a start, a colon, and an end value. Remember, the start is inclusive and the end is not inclusive. It goes up to the value of the end but does not include it. So let's try to get back all the letters of Vitis. So there are 5 letters in Vitis. And so you might think, well, we need 5 things, right? And we remember that the indexing starts at 0. So 5 things would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe to get the whole Vitis back, we go 0, 2, 4. And that is not the case. And remember, the reason is because the start value is inclusive. So this will be 1. But this will go up to the value of 4, but not include it. So for example, this is element 0, 1, 2, and 3. The fourth element is S, but it does not go up to 4. It just goes right up to it. And so to get back the whole value of Vitis from our variable genus, we have to remember that the end is not inclusive. We're going to go up to it, but not include it. So if we go from 0 to 5, that's 6 characters, but remember it doesn't include the 5. It just goes right up to it. And so that's why we get up to the 4th position of S and include it now. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, not including 5. Because characters in a string can be indexed, they're assigned values. You can do arithmetic with strings, believe it or not. So let's just create some more variables to set ourselves up for the next section. And let's just add genus plus species together. And we're going to create a new variable now, and let's call it wine. So if we create our new variable, wine, and we say it's equal to genus, which was Vitis, remember, plus species, which is the string vinifera, we can create that new variable and then we can print it. And let's see what we get. Then we get Vitis vinifera, all together as one because we added them together. For the next section, let's just create 2 more variables. Let's call one tequila in the same theme. And it comes from the plant agave, tequilana, and we have beer. And that comes from barley, Hordeum vulgare. And remember to execute this cell so that we can get those variables back. So let's print out our variables to make sure that they are okay. And remember, we can put multiple variables into our print function between the parentheses. They're separated by a comma. And then we get the values back for our 3 variables. For wine, we get Vitis vinifera, tequila, agave tequilana, and beer, we get Hordeum vulgare. Grapes, agaves, and barley. Notice that we have common names for all these, grapes, agave, and barley, but we have these very scientific names in Latin for these species, and there's always something called a genus, which is the first word, and a second word, which is called the species epithet. And together, these define a species. So we made all those variables because now we're going to get to something called lists. Lists are just like they sound. They are a list of data types. The data types can be strings, they can be numbers, they can be integers, they can be floats, they can even be lists. And we'll talk in just a second about creating a list of lists. You can put anything in your list that you want. Creating lists is very easy. You just use empty brackets. These brackets will not be touching another word like when you index, and this will initialize an empty list. Then we just fill the brackets with variables or strings, and they're separated by commas. So let's just create an empty list. We create a variable name, angiosperms, let's call it, which is the name for the flowering plants. And we're going to set it equal to an empty list. And all an empty list is just an empty set of brackets. We hit Shift Enter, and we will have created our new variable. It's very convenient to know we have all these variables. They're just a collection of letters. They have a name, right? Sometimes you might be confused. What do I have? Is it a string? Is it a list? Is it a number? Let's learn about our second function in Python. It's called type. So the function type, we have a set of parentheses, and we put an input into it, a variable of some sort, and type will return back to us what type of variable it is. So we just created an empty list for our variable angiosperms, and indeed that's what we have. It is a list. If you wanted to test this though, for example, wine, if you remember, was a string. It's vitis vinifera. It's just a collection of characters, and it's not a list. It's a string. So type will tell you what sort of data type that you're working with. If we look at the contents of our angiosperm list, it should be empty, right? We haven't put anything into it, and indeed we just get empty brackets back, but let's fill it up now. Filling up a list is really easy. All you do is you put in variables separated by commas. So in our list angiosperms, we're going to put it wine, tequila, and beer. We execute that cell. And now if we look at our list in it, because we put wine, tequila, and beer, we get back the values for those variables, which are vitis vinifera, agave tequilana, and hordeum vulgare. So that's how you create a list, a set of empty brackets. You put in variables, numbers, strings, other lists, as you'll see soon, anything you want. Another convenient function is something called len, for length. Length will give you back the length of a list, how many elements are in it. For example, we know that our angiosperm list has 3 elements in it, so if we put the list in the function length, we get back 3. We can use indexing to access specific list elements, just like you saw how you could access characters within a string, and it's done the exact same way. So if we have our list angiosperms, we can print it out, but we can also index it. We can index and see what the first element is, the 0th element, right? We can see what the 3rd element is, which is the second index position, or we can try to see what the entire list is. Again, remember there's 3 elements, which normally would be 0 to 2, but we need to go up to 3 because we'll go up to 3 but not include it. So if we look at the whole list, we have our 3 elements there. With 0 index, we fish out just the first element. With an index of 2, that ends up being the 3rd because it's 0, 1, 2, which is the barley. And then we can retrieve the entire list by actually specifying 4 different positions, because the last position, 3, it will go up to there but not include it. So how can we modify a list? List elements can just be reassigned using indexing. So for example, other species than vitis vinifera can be used to make wine. For example, some species we'll talk about later in this course, they are used for rootstocks instead, or they're hybridized with vinifera to make different types of wine. So maybe it's not right of us to call wine just vitis vinifera that specifically. Maybe we should say that it's all vitis. So let's try to turn vitis vinifera back into just vitis. So we can print out the first element of our angiosperm list with 0 and see what it is. It should be vitis vinifera. We specify that we're talking about the first element of angiosperms through indexing. So we say angiosperms index 0, and we just set it equal to vitis. Remember, it will be currently set to vitis vinifera, but then it changes into vitis. Then if we plot out the list again, we shouldn't have vitis vinifera, we should have just vitis. So you can see that the first element is vitis vinifera, we reassign it, and then when we print the list again, you can see that vitis vinifera has been transformed into vitis. All we did is we just used an equal sign and specified the first element with 0. Another way to modify lists that we will use very often is called the .append function. Step one for using this is to add the .append after a list name. Step two is to add within the parentheses the additional element that you would like to append to the list. The appended element will be added to the end of the list. So using length, we already know that our current list, angiosperms, has 3 elements. But let's say we wanted to add rice, used to make sake, to the end of our list. So we specify the list, angiosperms. This function we use by saying .append. You should think of this as the append is going to modify this list name. And we put in the string value that we want to add the name for rice, which is orize. So if we hit Shift Enter, we should be adding orize to the end of our angiosperm list. So let's print out our angiosperm list. Now you see we have 4 things. Orize, rice, has been added to the last position. And if we print out the length of our new angiosperms list, we see that it's 4, not 3. So we successfully appended this value to the end of the list. So I told you you can put anything you want in lists. You can put numbers, you can put strings, you can put integers, you can put floating points. You can even put lists within a list, which creates a list of lists. So before we do that, we're going to make a list of lists about all of plant evolution. So let's talk a little bit about plant evolution from a very broad perspective. Plants are essential to human life. You have undoubtedly ate a plant today. If you didn't eat a plant directly, you ate an animal, and the only reason that animal exists is because somewhere on the food chain, a plant was eaten. Plants clothe us, they shelter us, they medicate, they drug us, they inspire us. Plants also regulate global cycles of water. They are drawing water up through the soil, through their roots, and then through capillary action and evaporation, something called transpiration at their leaves. They're constantly pulling up water from the soil, releasing it into the air. They're also constantly assimilating carbon dioxide into sugars. And on longer periods of time, they're taking carbon and storing it in the ground through roots. Or on geologic scales, the plants are dying and storing carbon in the ground that way. Plants are diverse. They're even more diverse, as you'll see in a second, than just the plants we see on the land or even those that flower. And they're hierarchically organized, and this reflects their evolutionary history. And plants are defined by a single group, and this is defined by a single ancient endosymbiotic event that created chloroplasts when a eukaryotic cell engulfed a cyanobacteria. So just to give you an idea of what the diversity of true plants look like, remember, plants are defined by an ancient event where a eukaryotic cell with a nucleus engulfed a photosynthetic bacterium called a cyanobacteria. Some of the groups of plants that resulted from this through evolution were the Rhodophyta, the red algae, the green algae. Most of these live in marine environments. Some of them are giant single-celled organisms. So for example, this group of plants here and here are called Acetabularia, and these species are called Caulerpa, and they have either a lot of nuclei or a single nucleus, but they're one giant cell. This panel here is of the bryophytes, the mosses. These here are liverworts. They have flattened structures that make beautiful branching patterns. Here are the pteridophytes, the ferns. This is a panel of gymnosperms and pine cones. And then we have some beautiful flower monocots, and these are a specific group of dicots, the Nepenthes. These are from Ernst Haeckel's Art Forms of Nature, just to give you an idea of the forms of plants that are out there. But all these forms arise through evolution. And there's a whole naming scheme for plants, as you'll see in just a second, that's very hierarchical, but it comes from this tree arrangement of the plants, which results from evolution. And the way you should think of evolution is that there are common ancestors, and from these common ancestors, that likely don't exist anymore, but theoretically once did, arose multiple populations, and these populations are changing over time. And so you can see here we have the chlorophytes and chara. These are green algae. Most of these are marine, not all, but chara is a freshwater green algae. Then we go on to land and we get the mosses, we get the liverworts, the mosses, and the hornworts. The thing to know about these is that their dominant life stage is the gametophyte. This is a haploid stage of life, meaning it only has one copy of the genome. We go further and we get to lycophytes and ferns. This is where a dominant sporophyte, which is diploid, arises. You can also see that they independently evolved flattened photosynthetic structures that look a lot like leaves, except that they were independently evolved from leaves. So they're not technically leaves. This is a lot like a bat wing and a bird wing, which are independently evolved structures, but appear and serve similar purposes. We go farther and we have the evolution of seeds. These seeds are naked, which is the origin of the name gymnosperms, which means naked seed. These include pines. And then eventually we get to the angiosperms, the flowering plants, where the seed becomes enclosed in an ovary, and there are flowers. This figure was made by Eugene Plobskin, and it shows where in plant evolution all these novel features arose and the relationship of these plant groups that we'll be talking about today. So creating a list of lists is really easy. Remember, you can populate a list with any data type or a mixture of data types in Python, and we already saw how to populate a list. So that means you can just create a list and put in a bunch of strings and other lists. So for example, we just talked about all the plants. They have a name, the plantae. And then we have all these groups. I didn't talk about the glaucophytes. These are only a few species that are aquatic. But we have the red algae, the rhodophytes, the chlorophytes, the green algae, the charophytes, the freshwater green algae. We have the bryophytes, the mosses, the pteridophytes, the ferns, the gymnosperms, the pines and other naked seed plants, and we have the flowering plants, the angiosperms. But notice that with the quotation marks, these are all strings. But angiosperms is a list, remember. It has three things in it. It has Vitis vinifera, agave, and ordeum in it. So let's create our list, plantae, but it's a mixture of these strings and this other list. So some of the elements are just strings, but angiosperms is a list. So if we print out one of the strings, let's say position index 1, which remember is the second position, and then we print out index 7, which is the angiosperms, at position 2, which is index 1, we get the rhodophytes, but in index 7, we get back a list, right? Vitis, agave tequiliana, ordeum, and oryzae, as we created it. You can access, if you have a list within a list, you can actually access a specific element within the list of the list. The way you do that is with a double bracket notation. So the first bracket is going to be the index number of the list. So within plantae, we have angiosperms. But then the second double bracket is going to be for example, the second element of that list. So we had the angiosperms, and then with index 1, we're getting back the second element, which is agave tequiliana. So even if you have a list within lists, you can use double brackets to use indexing to try to access very specific elements. Like Vitis, which Vitis vinifera is used famously for wine, but you can use other Vitis species for wine too. Many agave types, other than tequiliana, are used for other things like fiber or food. And maybe we need to not be so specific again and change agave tequiliana to agave. You can do this just like the way we did before, but using the double brackets. So we get to the angiosperm list first, then we index the agave, and we just set it equal to agave. So now if we print it out, you see we no longer have agave tequiliana, but we only have agave. So you can reassign elements of a list using indexing just like we did in a simple list. Let's add some more lists by modification to this. Let's be more specific. We'll create a list called gymnosperms. Some gymnosperm types are conifers, cycads, and really interesting group of plants called gnetophytes. Some of the bryophytes are called mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. So let's shift enter and just create those two new lists. Then we want to replace what are just strings at the moment, right? So we should see where they are. So right at the moment, we have just a string called bryophytes, not a list. And we also have a string of gymnosperms, which is not a list. But we need to replace them with our list now through modification. So let's figure out where they are. They're in index position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So bryophytes is 4, 5, 6. So gymnosperms is 6. So they're at positions 4 and 6. So what we do is within Plantae in position 6, we put in the gymnosperm list, and within position 4, we put in the bryophytes list. Notice that these are not strings. They don't have quotations, and we defined them before as lists already. So if we print out our new Plantae list, what we get now is instead of having bryophytes as a string, now we have a list. And instead of having gymnosperms as a string, now we have a list as well. And so even though this is a list of lists, it is just a list, because a list is just a bunch of data types that we throw together. So if we look at the type of Plantae, we see that indeed it is a list. So what did we learn today? For the Python learning objectives, we learned how to create a variable. A variable is any set of characters you want to assign to it, but importantly, it does not have quotation marks. A variable will give you a value back. A string always has quotations, either double or single, but it will not give you a value back. We learned about our first function, print. A function always has parentheses, arguments or inputs go inside the parentheses, and we get an output back. We learned about indexing. This is one of the most foundational, fundamental concepts we will learn in this course. Indexing takes the form of square brackets with a start and an end. Index always starts at 0, not at 1 in Python. The start value is inclusive. The end value is not inclusive. It will go up to but not including the end value. These 3 points are critical in Python. Indexing starts at 0, the start value is inclusive, the end value is not inclusive. Put those into memory as soon as possible. It will come in handy. Indexing can be used to access specific string characters. We learned how to create lists. You just create empty brackets. You fill your list then with variables or strings or any other type of data type. The type function will tell you the data type that you have, a list, a string, an integer, a float. The length function will give you back the length of a list. We learned how to use indexing to access specific list elements. And we learned how to modify lists. List elements can be reassigned using indexing. You just index and set it equal to that. And then we can use the append function, and it's a dot function. So we put the dot append function after a list, and it will append whatever we put in the parentheses. We also learned how to create a list of lists, and the elements within a list of lists can be indexed using double brackets. For the plant learning objectives, again, plants are essential to human life. They feed, clothe, shelter, medicate, drug, and inspire us. They regulate global cycles of water and carbon. They are diverse, and much more diverse than just what we see on land or the plants that flower. They are hierarchically organized, and species are referred to by a genus and species names. And they are defined by a single ancient endosymbiotic event in which a eukaryotic cell with a nucleus engulfed a cyanobacterium that was photosynthetic. We had an overview of plant evolution. There are red and green algae. There are non-vascular plants. There are vascular seedless plants. And then there are seedless seed and flowering plants as well. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for listening.